Hey folks, welcome to this interesting video here on G4G. No, it's not actually going to be about Borderlands 3, that just happens to be the wallpaper that's up at the moment. Today, we're going to talk about how WoW, World of Warcraft, essentially gave us a model for the human response or the human condition to COVID. Here to refer to in the rest of the video as the itis. Otherwise, things get tagged weird on YouTube. So, the corrupted blood incident and the on purpose, non-accidental Scourge invasion that happened as TBC rolled into Wrath of the Lich King were two distinct events in World of Warcraft's history. One was an accident, which is the corrupted blood incident, and then the other one, the Scourge invasion, was done on purpose to sort of emulate the corrupted blood incident, but also as a tie-in thematically to how Wrath of the Lich King was going to be, which was a very undead / zombie oriented expansion in World of Warcraft's history. So, how things originally started was the fight in Zul'Gurub, which was Hakkar the Soulflayer. Now, there is a Zul'Gurub in the game now. However, that Zul'Gurub is simply a 5-man dungeon and is not modeled 100% after the original raid of Zul'Gurub. It's a shame because there are some mounts in the old Zul'Gurub that you can't get anymore, like the Tiger mount. You can maybe potentially get it on the black market, but you used to have to farm several bosses within the raid version of Zul'Gurub to get a mount that didn't make it into the dungeon version of it. So, I lived through this era of World of Warcraft. What happened was in the Hakkar fight, which is now somewhat similar to the Priestess fight in Untitled, which is a 5-man dungeon right now in Battle for Azeroth. Hakkar, how you did that fight is that there would be wind serpents that would troll the side areas of the Hakkar fight. So the Hakkar fight was up on a platform, and I'm going to use two videos for reference in this particular video. One will be the Corrupted Blood incident from the video game project, and the other will be the zombie plague from White Sword. Links will be in the description, just so that there's proof over there. So in the Hakkar fight over here, Hakkar was fought on a platform, but you can't see over here, along the sides were pathways. They were walkways over there, and there were wind serpents over there that when they died, they gave you the corrupted blood debuff. The idea was, similar to the fight in Untitled, is that you would get the debuff on as many characters as you could, and then when Hakkar did a move that would essentially suck health away from the players of the raid, which we'll see, yeah, the corrupted blood incident. Yeah, Veil Screechers, okay. No, they're not listing his abilities here. It might be over on like Thoughtbot, but he did basically a move at certain points of the fight where he would steal health from the raid, and he would regen health. The way you fixed it is by having your blood corrupted, so that when he drained your health, he was draining poison instead, thereby setting up a situation where rather draining good blood and restoring his health, he was actually similar to like sucking poison out of a snake bite. He was sucking corrupted blood out of you, and he was poisoning himself, and he would not regen health. And this is very similar to the Priestess fight in Untitled, where she does that transfusion, and she steals health from the 5-man group, But then if you stand in the puddle, you've corrupted yourself. So rather than inhaling health, hit points, whatever, from you, she winds up sucking off poison, and then she doesn't regain her health, and she gets damaged instead. In both instances, if you don't have enough people that were poisoned with corrupted blood, they would regen health. So the idea was to get more people than not poisoned so that the health regen was minimal or actually negative. Well, at the time in World of Warcraft, the programming said, the code said, this debuff drops off of people when they leave the raid because it is intended to be contained within the raid. However, accidentally and on purpose, people discovered, like you see here in this video with Humar the Lion, people discovered that if the debuff got on a pet and they dismissed the pet before the disease resolved, whether it was cleansed by a healer or fell off of the hunter pet naturally because it expires after 10 seconds, the pet would no longer carry the disease. So if you notice, the pet over there went from green, which was poisoned with the disease or affected with the disease, to now being normal colored. That's because the 10 seconds had expired. But if the pet got the debuff in the raid and then was dismissed, the clock stopped on the debuff because that's how WoW's code worked. And then people with a pet class, be it a warlock or a hunter, would summon their pet in a public area, like here, which is Old Orgrimmar, and then the disease would tick on the pet and burst into the people around the pet, thereby infecting them. And now they're bursting and infecting, and so on and so on. You get an exponential growth to the disease. And as you can see here, everybody that the hunter walked by with the pet became infected with corrupted blood. And now people are standing around infecting others. So that Tauren that was just standing there for a moment may have been AFK, getting a drink, going to the bathroom, getting some food, and became infected with the disease just by standing there. And now that person became a fountain of the disease themselves. So anybody who walked by this Tauren that's going by with the staff of the purple crystal, which is a druid, got diseased. This is a great model of how the itis can spread. Now, originally, when the CDC took note of what was happening with the corrupted blood event and said this is a great model for how diseases may spread out there in the wild and everything, and how contact diseases spread, and so yeah, now this priest is infected. It literally became almost like a movie. It became a human model of how we would deal with diseases. There were classes who could remove the disease from people in World of Warcraft, like priests and shaman. They could cast something called Cure Disease and remove it from people. Well, that shows good-hearted people, doctors, people who work in hospitals, people who work in clinics, people who attempt to stem the flow of this disease that everybody is facing. That's somewhat equivalent to people who wear masks now. That's people who are working on the front lines of treating people with COVID and everything, or the itis. Similar analogy to real life. However, as you can see, with exponential growth out of a disease or a virus, they become overwhelmed. There is only so much that a doctor can do when faced with this onslaught of the disease. And as you can see, this priest keeps getting infected herself over here, and that represents nurses and doctors being at risk for getting the itis themselves because of their constant frontline treatment. So that was what happened during the corrupted blood incident. Now, where the human condition comes into this is originally people said that this was not a good example of how a pandemic would happen, because in a game, people could troll others. They could deliberately go into the raid, get a pet, do what was the likely the accidental first action of dismissing a pet in combat and then bringing an infected pet to a capital city. They would purposely do it to infect people, because what are you really losing? You didn't lose gold. Well, you lost gold in this if you had a repair, but you didn't like lose your loot the way Ultima and some other MMOs would do. You just died, and then you walked back to your body and you rezzed. The disease was gone, and if you've avoided the disease again, you were fine. So people were like, well, we're just going to do this on purpose because who cares? It's a video game. Fast forward 15 years later, and that isn't the case. You do have people who are poor at the human condition. For example, recently in Tuscaloosa, Alabama, where the University of Alabama is, people had a COVID party. Now, we've all heard of parents having chickenpox parties where one local kid gets chickenpox, so everybody gets together and throw their kids in around on chickenpox kids so that they get it early, and when they're young, when they're more than likely to have very little repercussions of having chickenpox. Pass whatever judgment you want on that. We're not here to discuss that. But what's happening is a student or students who were diagnosed with the itis in Tuscaloosa, Alabama, attended parties in the city and the surrounding areas so others could see who would actually catch it. Whoever catches it wins the money that was put into a pot. I mean, this is Russian roulette on a level we've never seen before. And, you know, sorry to say, this is also the same generation as the Tide Pod morons, which... sorry if that offends anybody in that age group, but, I mean, this is ridiculous that they're throwing money into a betting pot to see who would get it by hanging out with the person who has it. This shows that the human condition that original researchers said, it's not going to happen. This won't be how a pandemic goes because you won't have people purposely pulling this crap. Well, people are purposely pulling this crap. I mean, it's absolutely crazy. And then World of Warcraft went one step further from the Corrupted Blood incident and did this thing at the border between the Burning Crusade and Wrath of the Lich King called the pre-Wrath Scourge invasion. So what this was is there were spreaders. There were ziggurats that would appear relatively close to the very populated areas of World of Warcraft, Orgrimmar, Stormwind, etc. They were plague spreaders. They literally were like when you seed your lawn or you fertilize your lawn and you have that fertilizer spreader that you walk behind and it goes and it spreads fertilizer on your lawn. Well, in World of Warcraft, it was a plague spreader. It was a ziggurat. It was a floating temple that hung in the air outside major areas that spread that green gas you see on the screen. That was called the Blight. The Blight would turn people into zombies after they were affected for a while by it. And you would lose your normal abilities that you have, and you would just get these zombie abilities that you see down here at the bottom of the screen. These are all zombie-related abilities, which would eventually go on to be somewhat similar to the Death Knight and Death Knight abilities. So here, this druid has come across a zombie party and is running away to get affected. So this is a person who would be the equivalent nowadays of somebody who has a mask and is walking into a store and sees a whole bunch of unmasked people. It's like, nope, I don't want to go in that store. I really don't need a drill bit right now. I'm not going into this Home Depot. I'm out. I'm going to order one online. Help. God help. Please leave me alone. And you can see this horde of zombies, which are controlled. These are not out of control, berserk, mindless zombies. These are humans trying to track down this druid over here in cat form and infect the person. Unlike the corrupted blood incident, the Wrath Scourge invasion was done on purpose. This was a deliberate thing to represent the he's gonna dive in the water. So now it's representative of somebody like getting on a boat and boating out to an isolated island to get away from those infected with COVID. The itis. It's hard not to say COVID at times. But that is what people did under both incidents, whether it was the corrupted blood incident or it was the Scourge invasion, in order to get away from people who had the disease or people who were maybe deliberately spreading it. What you see over here, this is a Wind Rider. These are the people who controlled the transportation of World of Warcraft. This is essentially a train, a plane, a subway, a bus station, any mass transit. The plague would spread to the people who ran the mass transit. So if you were unaware of what was happening in this town, which was called Ratchet, let's just say this is Philadelphia. So if you didn't know Philadelphia was a huge itis hotspot, and you landed in Philadelphia, and you saw a whole bunch of people sick and affected and not wearing masks, and you're like, oh God, get me out of here, you couldn't, because the people running the public transit were now sick and couldn't run the public transit. That's kind of an example of what's happening with that druid that just ran away. Probably stepped off the boat, saw a whole bunch of infected in here, and ran away. Well, the thing is, if all the public transit is unmanned and down, then you can't get away. So you get in a hotspot that you don't know is a hotspot, and you're stuck. How people avoided getting infected at this point in time, whether it was the Scourge invasion or the corrupted blood incident, is people socially distanced. They left the big towns. They didn't go to the auction house, which was huge. They didn't go to the people who repaired your gear. They didn't go to the people where they could buy food and drink. They didn't seek out other players that could make the food and drink and hand it to them, or gems, or gear. They could craft gear for them and everything. They went to the smaller towns to try and get away. And then eventually people with the itis on purpose would then start seeking out the medium-sized towns and try to infect people there. So it spread everybody out to the wind. The best thing to do was not go near any of the big cities or any of the joint cities like Booty Bay, which were Horde and Alliance. The only way you could avoid getting this corruption would be either to not log in and play, but that wasn't really a thing, or just stay away from everybody, which is social distancing. People who use these two things as models for pandemic believe that humans weren't going to act like idiots, and that they would social distance, they would stay in their small towns, they would seek out a priest or shaman, a doctor, to remove their condition and everything like that. And we're finding out, at least here in the States, that that's not the case. That people are idiots. If there was a World of Warcraft news station that existed at the time, and they said, don't go to Orgrimmar, don't go to Thunderbluff, don't go to Stormwind, don't go to Ironforge right now, it's an itis hotspot, 20-30% of the people are affected. You don't know somebody's affected until maybe it's too late. Stay away from big towns, socially distance, stay away from other people, stay in your homes, your small villages, stay questing out in the field somewhere where the only thing you're around is other monsters, wolves, boars from the South Park episode. Kill thousands and thousands of boars. That's what we were told in the States. Wear your mask, stay socially distant, don't go out, order stuff in as much as you can, don't go and get a haircut, don't go to hotspots, don't go to bars, don't go to beaches. Well, yeah, the World of Warcraft players back then proved the human condition isn't as cut and dry as we thought. So you have people who defied those orders, like these idiots, and did seek out all these areas where the hotspots are, did go to the beaches, did go to the bars, did go and get infected by a hairdresser who may have seen up to 100 people while they were asymptomatic, did go to a restaurant in China and sit near an air conditioner while they were asymptomatic, and the air conditioner blew that person's itis infection to 20 other people in the restaurant, who then probably went home to their small villages and infected 20 other people with the itis. There are people railing against and rallying around the opposite of what we would hope for in this. And, you know, I'm sorry if that sounds political from a channel on YouTube that is typically just doing gaming and stuff like that and does not really ever let politics bleed in. But I don't consider this a political thing because it's only really political in the States and maybe England. Other places it's not political. It's just simply a matter of right and wrong and being smart, because we don't have a dev team that can turn corrupted blood off for everybody, everywhere. We don't have that until a vaccine happens and then is made readily available and cheap, where you could drive up to a clinic and stick your arm out the window and get a shot and drive off, the way you can with itis testing. Until that happens, we're left to ourselves to be away from these hot spots, to not do this and walk up to people and get that. Look at this is example of not social distancing, and you have states and cities and people saying to do this, reopen crowds doing this. And yes, even the protests, even though the protests are not social distancing, they've largely worn masks and everything, but the rallies and all these situations where they're packing people in this close to each other, the corrupted blood that happened here will never go away. The only way that it goes away, if these 50 people here in this screenshot got away from each other and the disease would tick down on that person, it wouldn't get shared to anybody else, and then that would be it. But here in this not social distancing, it kept hopping from person to person. And if this person, Shekels, was not infected and they were sitting behind that warrior and this warlock, both of those people were so close to this Shekels person that they're probably going to get infected. The only way to stop it is to go away. It's to go to the small villages that they say and do everything you need. And what happens is when that doesn't happen, we're never going to get rid of it. And there's people who post these long tirades and diatribes of like, this is going to be the new world order and everybody's going to have to wear a mask and then everybody's going to have to get vaccinated. And then everybody's going to have to have a card that says, I was vaccinated, and you can't walk into the McDonald's or the Walmart or the BJ's Club unless you have that card. It's going to be the New World Order, and nobody's going to have rights, and blah, blah, blah. If people are stupid and continue to expose themselves by not staying socially distant and avoiding hotspots and protecting themselves, we may get to that point. And the only way to avoid getting to that point is do what you're supposed to do. Stop the spread. Don't get near people who may have it. And if you think you may have it or were exposed and could be in your asymptomatic phase, quarantine. Go to your small village. Go mow your lawn in peace with nobody around you. Don't go to the Sam's Club without a mask. Try to make a purchase return and then throw a goddamn adult hissy fit when nobody wants to help you because you're not wearing a mask and you don't want to step outside. This was the stupidest video I'd ever seen. A woman who looked in her 50s took a mask from an employee, hung it on her ear, but then didn't wear it and threw a fit when nobody would help her. And they said, if you step outside, we will do this for you, but you need to get away from other people. And you can see customers taking wide arcs around this lady. No, she didn't go outside. She sat on the ground and leaned her back up against a mobile cart that was near the exit that somebody was standing at. That lady who was at the cart moved it back so that it wasn't making contact with No Mask Lady, and then No Mask Lady leaned back, didn't feel the cart, and then shimmied backwards on her butt a couple feet so that she was leaning on the cart again. And literally the exit was 6 feet away from her. Daylight was like 6 feet away. They're like, get out. We will hand you your stuff outside, but you need to get out. And she just sat there like a baby who wasn't given cookies at the grocery store after pointing to it. So the people who looked at the corrupted blood incident and the Scourge invasion and said humans will never do this, only gamers will be this idiotic, there you go. We have young people acting this way with the COVID party. We have older people acting this way, going my rights, and sitting down in the middle of a BJ's or a Sam's Club or whatever place it was, and throwing temper tantrums because they can't wear a mask for 6 minutes to do a product return. And now we are looking at a corrupted blood Scourge invasion that will never end until we isolate the people who have it and it stops getting spread. So that's how World of Warcraft became a model for a pandemic. And people talked about these things years ago. But years ago when we were talking about them, everybody said, well, humans may not act that way. We don't think this will be the model. Well, guess what? It is in fact the model when you have poor leadership. Look at New Zealand. New Zealand is basically done with the itis. They were an isolated island nation. They did what they were supposed to do to stop the spread, and they hit a point where they had 0 new cases, and it's over. At least as far as I know, last time I checked, it's over in New Zealand because they did the right thing. From leadership on down to the regular people, it was, listen, this is what you need to do. This is what you need to do to fix it. Get the hell away from people. Have your social distancing. Have your masks. And don't get around. Just don't be a hotspot. Don't get in the hotspots. Don't do what you're about ready to see here. Don't run around Auckland, and get inside when maybe you have it. Maybe the person next to you have it. And there you go. That's right here. What you're seeing now is what didn't happen over there. And they're done. And you know what? That new world order that people said is going to happen with masks and vaccines and cards proving you're okay, it's not happening over there because people were smart and did the right thing. All we have to do is be smart, and then none of this crazy tinfoil hat crap is going to happen. And look, even in their guild chat, look, go into the auction house right there in the guild chat. It says it. People are deliberately infecting others in the auction house over here. It's kind of happening in real life. So That's it for me, guys. Again, I hope you don't necessarily think of this video as political or trying to push a point or an agenda. It's simply a video about how two pandemics in World of Warcraft did actually give us good models of real-life pandemics and prove that people could be as nutty as the gamers. Thanks for checking out the video, guys. Let me know what you think below.